Hey everybody, welcome to the Better Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Jared Berry.
My name's Mark Freeman, and together we have over 30 years of youth ministry experience.
We created this resource to be of value to you and your youth ministry team. Hopefully you enjoy it, you benefit from it. Our goal is to invest in you as youth leaders so that you can invest in your students.
If you found this useful, please like and share with as many people as possible so that we can see better student ministries.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Better Student Ministry Podcast. Mark, it's good to be back, man.
It is. And this is kind of a fun season. I just sent my kids to school for their first day of school today. Not like ever, but for the school year.
Yeah.
So I got a sophomore, I got two fifth graders and a fourth grader. All of them successfully got on the bus today and are about to change the world.
That means you deserve a medal.
I think so.
And your wife's a teacher, so wasn't she gone?
I was utterly alone.
She abandoned you in a time of need.
Yes.
Just you, the dog.
Thankfully, she did. The girls were so uber excited. They got up crazy early this morning.
Yeah.
So like they were up early enough for her to do their hair.
Okay.
I'm one of those dads where like if they're like asking me to do something significant with their hair, I'm like, sweetie pie, like
Yeah, daddy has limits.
that ship has sailed. I should be good at it though. I feel like I'm like artsy. I should be able to figure out
Can
how
you do
to
a braid?
I can. I am not. No, I cannot.
Okay.
No.
I can do a braid.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
look at
I mean,
you.
not a good braid.
Yeah. I'm good at the sporty ponytail.
Okay.
And I'm great at messy hair day.
Hey,
I'm a pro on that day.
little known fact about me. I have one crazy hair day for my kids on multiple
you
occasions.
have, huh?
Well, my wife was gone. She was teaching as well.
Yeah.
And so I had to do it, and they won multiple occasions.
Great job. So proud of you.
It's really one of the
Just
pinnacles.
winning as a dad.
One of the heights of my
Yep.
lifetime as a dad. So
To have peaked so early.
yeah. So you can see the theme whenever you're listening to this. It is currently, when we're recording this, the very beginning of a school year.
That's right.
And we're excited to kind of be back for unofficially season 3
Yeah.
of Better Student Ministry Podcast.
Yeah, man.
And how was your summer? Give me some highlights. I know you did a lot of different things.
Yeah.
A bunch involving youth ministry.
No, it was great. It was a very busy summer. I feel like I say this every year, and this is how I know I'm getting old, is when I'm like, this was the fastest summer that I've ever lived through.
I feel the same
Like
way.
I feel like that's what you say when you're old, but it genuinely felt like that. Is the Earth spinning faster than it used to,
Probably.
or is it slowing down? I can't remember which one of those is happening.
I don't know.
It was a very fun summer, very fast summer. It was a weird summer around here because it was kind of wet and cold-ish. In fact,
Yeah.
the nicest 3 days of summer we just had, and by nicest I mean like hot and gross.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I've got a great friend that has a pool. Her name is Jen. It's your wife, and so. Yeah, it was a good summer. We had a great time down at Nationals in Columbus with our students for the National Fine Arts Festival and the National Youth Convention, which was a blast. Got a couple camping weekends in with the family, so it was nice. It was a good summer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, my highlight this summer is we run a summer camp, and we got to do that for a week with students, and it was just a great week, and love it. Love seeing students change for Christ and impacted and coming together.
Yeah, this seemed like a big spiritual summer, even for my daughter who's a teenage in the youth group now, and for her peers, like some really, I think, really significant milestones in like their spiritual life.
Yeah.
My daughter was baptized in the Holy Spirit at summer camp. Thanks for being a part of helping to facilitate that with the Holy Spirit. I appreciate that. And then just some really powerful like spiritual moments in prayer spent with her friends.
Yeah.
Which of course, as a dad, like it fills my heart so much. And so like it was cool because it started with teen camp, and then it started with a missions trip, and then it went into teen camp, and then it went into nationals, and like thank God she's got some awesome youth leaders who are investing in her life as well. And
sure.
and so now as we launch into fall, let's talk about how we capture some of that momentum, right? Like I know for most people that are listening to this now, their school year's already started. So like there's some things, in fact, we have another podcast if they want to look about like that transition from summer into fall. But let's talk about the significance of the beginning of the school year and like how to take advantage of some of the already perpetual motion of the beginning of a school year and all the new things that come with it, and how you can kind of maybe ride from some of the great energy and positive things that God has done in the summer with teenagers into the fall.
Yeah, it's such a big time of year. I mean, we know the new year is like January, but in youth ministry world,
Yeah.
this is kind of the new
Yeah.
year. You
Yep.
know, it runs with the school calendar, and summer is awesome. As we talked about, great things can happen, but summer typically is there's some other focuses where now we're back in school. It's
Sure.
like let's gear up,
I
let's
also recognize
go.
some churches take off for
Yep.
sometimes the summer, but sometimes just a couple weeks before, so it feels like a big back to
Yeah.
school launch and things like
Well,
that too.
and this
Sometimes,
is a lot of churches. This is like their moving up time. So
right, right,
wherever
right.
your youth group starts, this is when
Yeah,
new kids are going to
that's
enter
right.
that are part of your
Which is a
church.
big deal.
It's a big deal, yeah. So a lot of it's really important because culturally things can change, right?
Sure,
You've
you're
got
losing
this
some seniors.
losing some seniors, sometimes a lot of seniors.
Yep, and those tend to be, especially the ones that are like all in. Those tend to help set the mood for
Right.
a large group gathering and things like
Yeah.
that. So, and then, like you said, depending when you start, you've got these little baby sixth graders or seventh graders moving up into your youth
Yep.
ministry, and depending on the size of that class, it can change the
can really
temperament of a room
change.
real quick
Yeah.
too. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's such a pivotal time. So we want to have some conversation about what are some important things to be thinking about, to have in our minds in this kind of season. Because I
Yeah.
think this season lasts for honestly a couple of months.
yeah,
It's not just like that first Wednesday back, right? But it's this kind of season of restarting, getting things moving,
Yeah.
coming out with a lot of energy. And so we want to have that conversation a little bit. So
yeah,
for me, one of the things that I think about the most at this time, as far as being important, is to have clarity on number one, our mission, right? Like, why are we here? But let's assume that that's the case. But the second thing is to have clarity on our systems,
yeah.
the things that we have in place, because as we referenced, like it is such a big time for new students coming in,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's a lot of good leverage for people inviting new students because they're back to school, and
Right.
so there's a lot of newness, and I think in times of newness we can forget. Or there's a lack of awareness from maybe you have new leaders, you have new
Sure.
students, new parents that are involved.
Yeah.
They don't know your systems. They don't know how stuff works. So unless you're really on top of that, it can easily kind of like float to the background.
Sure.
And then all the excitement of like, man, I can't wait. We're getting back. We're going to do a big service, or we're
Yeah.
doing this big outreach or whatever.
Turns into the chaos of disorganization, right?
Exactly. And we can, why that's important is systems prevent you from missing opportunities. And so systems like, do we have a good way of accounting for everyone that's a part of the ministry? Do we have a good system in place for connecting with parents and all those kind of things?
Yeah.
So whatever your systems are, and if you don't have any, we've done some podcasts
Sure,
on that.
yeah. Yep.
But making sure that we hit the ground with excellence when it comes to our systems,
Yeah.
whether it's with students, with parents, or with our leaders.
Yes,
So
good.
we're really setting the stage well moving into the new year.
No, that's great. And when you say systems and thinking of like how to set everybody up for success with that, one of the first things that comes to mind is the calendar of your parents,
Yeah.
the calendar of your kids, right? So now that the school year is back in full swing, you're competing with certainly fall sports, but as you're projecting your calendar through the year, you're competing with band lessons, you're competing with sports, you're competing with all the extracurricular stuff, you're competing with jobs potentially for some of your older students, you're competing with, just the chaos of the family schedule. And so one of the priorities early as possible, and even if I don't have all the details, the specific details yet, I want to get dates in the hands of our students and our parents as soon as possible,
Right.
so they can start planning. And I can give them usually ballparks on numbers as far as costs and stuff. And so what I always did at the beginning of the school year is I would make a big poster card size magnet. You can get them from like Vistaprint and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Sponsor of
good.
today's episode. No, that'd be great. And I'd put as many dates and as much information as I had. And then I would even say these are estimated costs. We might not know them until closer.
Yep.
But if I'm a parent or even a student who's responsible and wants to go, or their parents like, you're going to have to figure out how to pay for this,
Right.
they can start to plan ahead and figure out,
Yeah.
okay, here's the dates, here's the money I need to have. And we always had a fall retreat. So like we would hit a price point pretty early on in the year, which, by the way, we can talk about a little bit as well. And it might be a little late this year for some people to plan a fall retreat, but man, it was the highlight of our youth ministry for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that idea. And that matters. That's a system that matters not as much to students, but it
Yeah.
really matters to parents and leaders.
Right. And if you want your
And
kids to something, you got to think about the parents and leaders. If you want
absolutely.
your leaders at something, they got to know too. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great idea to be thinking
Yeah.
through. I mean, another important thing is like, how are we tracking the students that are there?
Yeah.
And do we have, so twofold, do we know what students are there?
Yeah.
And then do we have the systems in place to make sure we have leaders that are connected with new students,
Yeah.
leaders that are going to follow up with new students? And we've talked about this in some other podcasts, but our goal was always like a 5-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
So what do you do if you have a new influx of sixth graders and the leaving of seniors? Well,
Yeah.
if you don't have that stuff thought through and a plan in place, there's the potential that people could slip through the cracks. So that's another system that I like to think about is like, how do we make sure? Because sometimes you know how this is, like when a new student comes for the first time, like I always think to myself, like, man, this is such a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like I want to make sure. Now they may not want to come back, but I want to make sure we've done everything we can
Sure.
to make sure it's not on us.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
and
The reason they're not coming back isn't because they showed up and it was like, what the heck is this?
right, or nobody said hi to them, and nobody hugged them.
Yeah.
No leader was able to connect with them, and I know I'm not great at this sometimes because you just get into the cycle of stuff and you're moving and grooving. But if you prepare ahead of time to make sure,
Yeah.
like every leader's okay, you guys know here's our new students. Who you going after? Who you
good.
gonna pray for? Who you gonna call or text or
Yeah.
whatever?
And,
You
and
know,
you might not know who that all is until a couple weeks in. But if
Yeah.
if your leaders are going in on whenever your large group gathering nights are, or small groups, or however you do it, like anticipating those new kids, because listen, I did it too. The default is go find the kids that you loved. You maybe haven't seen them for a couple of weeks during the summer, and you could spend a whole night like that just talking to kids you already connected with and already knew.
Yep.
Right. Even better, go grab that kid and go together and introduce yourself to somebody that's new in the room, or hey, have them be like, hey, come sit next to me or whatever. Like having some student liaisons in the room, those key kids that are going to be faithful to that sort of thing, could be a huge win too.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my question for you.
Yeah.
Another thing I think about beyond systems is taking advantage of this season is there tends to be a upward trend in excitement amongst people. There's just kind of like it's kind of that back to school thing too,
Yeah.
right? That lasts for a little bit of
Yeah, yeah.
time and then it's like, oh, school.
Yeah.
So how do we take advantage of that?
Sure.
Like in your mind, how do you as a youth pastor take advantage of that kind of like more excitement, more maybe like willingness to come out, check it out, parents to bring their kids?
Sure.
What are some things that you think of when you think of that?
Yeah, the taking advantage of the momentum of the beginning of the school year. One of the things, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, we would always do a fall retreat, and it was just our group, and it was usually like the end of September, beginning of October, and it was the primary intention of that retreat was group unification, to get to know each other, hang out. There's, it was spiritual in nature as well, because we're a community, a worshiping community together, and we're going to ask some hard questions together, and we're going to struggle through some things together, and kind of establishing through a weekend like that, like it's okay to ask hard questions. It's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to struggle with things, and so like creating some mood at the beginning of the school year that whatever you bring to the table, that's what we want you to show up with, and it's okay, and we're all different, but there's this unification, and we're going to care for one another, and we're going to find out a little bit more about who Jesus is. Whether I believe in him or not, we're going to still find out a little bit more about who this person Jesus is. So even though the school year has maybe already started, there's still some ways that you can establish that, whether it's in your large group gatherings or your small group gatherings, or maybe even consider doing some kind of a easy overnight thing. Maybe you're not doing a big retreat where there's going to be a big cost or a multiple day thing, but the idea of establishing a worship night at the beginning of your fall season, where I think maybe the key is expectation. We're going to create expectation at the beginning of the school year. And so grab a hold of that energy, because it's already an expectant season, to be like, hey, we're going to expect this school year, God is going to say something. He's going to communicate some clear way to us, something that we need to hear. And if I go into the beginning of the school year expecting him to do that, then my ears are going to be primed for it. Or we're going to expect that God's going to use me somehow. It might not be to save my entire school, but it could be to save a depressed friend in the room from considering self-harm or so like elevating the expectation with the beginning of the school year. Not that it's just going to be awkward and hard because class is going to be difficult, but that God will and can move through me in my school amongst my peers, and so I think priming that energy with expectation in whatever way that is, whether it be through worship, through prayer together, through And I'm not proposing some kind of hype, just all emotional sort of thing, but like talking through the sober reality of the highs and the lows, and but yet still being expectant. And
Yeah, for me, I always think of the beginning of the year as like such an important time to connect adult leaders in relationship with students, and obviously, and you reference this with the retreat, to connect students in relationship with each other. It's such an important time. If in your discipleship strategy you're like, hey, we're trying to connect these adult leaders with these students for the rest of the school year, well, this is a pretty opportune season to fast track relational equity, right?
Yeah.
That's what takes a disciple. Like, you got to have relationship equity built up, and we talk about this in other situations. But so I would like to create an opportunity for that to happen. So one of the things that you could do, and we certainly did these, is we would do like all-nighter lock-ins. Which are, I mean, they're crazy to run, and it's like you're up all night. But as far as
you're not talking like preach at them.
No,
it's just purely relationship, biblical community, hanging out together stuff.
And you
right?
could kick it off with a service if you want, but primarily the focus is, hey, we're gonna have it all night. We're gonna hang out all night. Which, number one, is if you do all night lock-ins, they'll probably be the most attended event you do. Because the kids just love them.
Yeah, Pastor Pablo just did one like 2 weeks ago, right? Or a week ago, as the school year was starting, and they show up.
And think about the amount of time your adult leaders get to hang. You're literally locked into a building, so it's not that much space, and they're just hanging out with them, doing fun stuff all night, right? Making memories.
Sure.
And so, leading out of that, imagine now the conversations and the ability to shoot a text or a message, and you're create, and it doesn't have to be a lock-in. Maybe not everyone wants to do that, but how do we create opportunities like that to build up a lot of relationship equity off the bat? So then you can start cashing those chips as you're going along.
One of the reasons why even I brought up the idea of what are you doing at that event or at something is keeping in mind these kids are just getting back to school, and so they're going to be sitting in classes all day, and their body has not picked up the rhythm of like being able to just sit in one place. And so like if they're in school all day sitting at their desk, and then they show up for your large group gathering on Wednesday night or whenever you gather, and it feels like a classroom setting again, you're going to get some fatigue pretty quickly in them. So I would say think about those first couple of services, how to keep them moving. Maybe they feel a little different than your traditional youth group service, so that it's not like, I go to school all day and I was so excited to see my friends and hang out, which is where the relationship piece is primed for that right now. And then just make them all sit shoulder to shoulder again and listen to another teacher talk So like really think about what those first couple of services can look like. Not that they become devoid of spiritual content in some way, but maybe think creatively about how you can establish some of that stuff.
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned earlier something that I thought was really good, and this is something I think is important.
I mentioned a lot of things that's really good, usually.
Yeah, I don't know, but this one was decent.
This one really stuck out.
You kind of talked about creating spiritual expectation right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think for a youth pastor, youth leader, like the importance of having a vision for the year and like a spiritual vision.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like saying, like one of the things I would always try to do is really get a sense of like, God, what do you want our focus to be this year? And of course, the focus is always Jesus. But I think when you're pastoring a group of teens, like you can start to hear from the Lord as far as like maybe there's something to really lean into that year. That maybe it's like, I know some people do like spiritual themes or like a verse for the year or whatever. But what's kind of going to be our emphasis, our focus this year, and start to think through how do I implement that in our time together, in my message together. I think it speaks into what you were talking about creating some spiritual expectation of like,
Yeah.
here's what I really feel like the Lord wants to do in our group this year.
Yeah, it's good. And I would say this generation now more than ever, like are sensitive to that and ready for it, honestly, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And then of course, there's ways that you can do it where it's super weird and quirky and they're uncomfortable. But like this generation and even just the culture that we live in right now, I think there's a priming for something spiritual. Now, right now, unfortunately, they're going after it in a lot of really funky ways.
Yep.
But we need to be aware of it, and we need to give them an alternative to some of the other garbage that's out there for them, in seeking something bigger than themselves, something more, something outside of them that they can be connected to, a part of, and obviously. We're biased in that we believe being a part of God's family and community is that thing. So don't be shy about providing opportunities for that, for spiritual depth, for and again, kind of setting up that expectation for it. Like you got to be intentional about it,
Right.
communicating it to them, but we have to be intentional about that as well. We as leaders, we can't just be like, well, if God's in it, he'll show up and he'll do something. No, there's a lot that we can. Did you ever do any like staff retreats or a personal like retreat where you're getting away for planning or organizing your year or anything like that? If you did, what did that look like?
We did some things like that, not as much like getting away, because for schedules and people that were working
Yeah.
full time, it was a little more challenging. But we would do, number one, we would do monthly meetings every month.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we would have some focused times where we would talk about like certainly leaning into a new year, like here's some of the big things we want to focus on, lean in on, and I will say this, and I don't know if this is where you're going, but I do think it's a good transition to the next thing. Is like one of the focuses of this year, and this should always be a focus, and we've talked about this, but this unique season I think provides opportunity, is recruiting, building, developing your team.
Yeah.
Not only are the teens excitement level amped up,
Yeah.
but even adults' willingness to serve and kind
Sure.
of, if that's on their heart,
And their engagement is probably the highest at the beginning. Your
Right.
leaders is probably the highest at the beginning of the school year,
Right.
as it is any time in the school year.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, you're totally
so
right.
whether it's recruiting and having your eyes open for new leaders,
Yeah.
building the culture and team of your leaders currently, like
Yeah.
it's such a pivotal time, because if you're not prepared, if you're kind of doing things halfway, just kind of winging it, all of those things are picked
Yeah.
up on, and you're
all
setting
those-
culture.
That's exactly right. I was going to say too. All the things that you're not saying are also communicating something to your leaders
Right.
as well.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
And sometimes I think unintentionally we can make it seem like what they're doing in their role is less important
Yeah.
than what it actually is by the things that we are saying or not saying.
Sure.
And especially like the temptation at the beginning of the year to like, I want everything to be perfect, therefore I'm going to do everything, and I'm not going to, and I'm not going to like, I'll have leaders kind of standing around and maybe we're not even giving instruction, and I've been to youth groups before where
Yeah.
it's like the leadership team is all kind of standing together and the kids are over here, and
Yeah.
and meanwhile the youth pastor's running like a chicken with their head cut off, and I'm like,
That sounds like every Wednesday night for me. Gosh, I was a failure.
but at the end of the day, like, what is that, right? A lot of that is lack of empowerment, lack of clarity
Yeah.
for them, as knowing like, hey, here's the expectation. Like, you should not be sitting talking to each other.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, you should be hanging with students.
Sure.
You should be.
If you guys want to hang out together, that's great. I want you all to hang out.
Right.
This isn't the time for
Right,
it. Right.
exactly, yeah.
Take advantage of that momentum. Take advantage of
Yeah.
the beginning of the school energy, and that's a big piece of it for sure.
And one of the things I would do too, as far as the lead team goes, is I would really like in my mind gear myself up to be prepared for late nights, and I would look to after youth ministry when students have kind of left. I'm all in with leaders. I'm hanging out with leaders. So whether we'd go and get food afterwards, even if we were just hanging out the bit. Like I always had leaders, not everybody, but I always had leaders that they were excited and wanting to hang out. And so for me, in my mind, especially as you get older, like I needed to prep myself to go like, this season is too important. I can't be like, hey guys, I'm tired. I'm gonna head out, have a great night. Like I gotta lean into that relational opportunity, even if that means I'm out till midnight and I know I got to get up for a staff meeting the next morning. Like it is what it is, you know?
Yeah. And not only are you investing in those leaders, but you're modeling for them what you want them ultimately to do with your students as well, right? And they pick up on that. They're smart enough to fit. And then you can also communicate that to them as well. Not that you're like, the only reason I'm hanging out with you is because ... But that idea of modeling and replicating, and I mean that's the discipleship model, right? We talk about that all the time. So no, that's good. I love that. Another piece of like the beginning of the school year expectation setting. One of the things that I would do is I would have our students at the beginning of the school year write a letter to their future self. It sounds weird. It sounds trippy, but honestly, every time we did it, and then I would collect them all. I would have them sign their name. They could write whatever they wanted. I gave them some ideas of some things to talk about, but they're writing to their future self. Usually it was like not right after the new year, but like, March, April, towards the end of the school year self, May-ish time. And so they would write a letter to themselves expressing some of their hopes, their expectations, writing a prayer for themselves for the future. And then I would have them seal it in an envelope and write their name across the seal so they knew I wasn't peeking at it. This is for their eyes only. I honestly didn't care. And I know some kids just wrote absolute nonsense and garbage in there because they would show me, they think it's hilarious after the fact. I just got my letter. And then I would mail it to them in May or in June at the end of the school year. And so many times it was really powerful for some students.
Wow.
They would either see breakthrough that they had been praying for the school year or that they wanted to see in the school year. Usually I would have them like write down a couple of targeted people in their life that they wanted to be praying for, those sorts of things. Sometimes it was just a pep letter to themselves, encouraging themselves. And they would almost all of them would forget. Usually there would be like one kid every year that would be like, hey, have you sent those letters out? Have you sent those letters out? It was always a girl. The boys would always forget.
Of course.
But it would just show up one day in their mailbox. First of all, who doesn't like getting a random handwritten letter? And then from your past self, even that much cooler. It was a really cool way of establishing expectation at the beginning of the school year. And it was such low-hanging fruit to do it. Yeah.
That's
it was
a great
cool.
idea. I love that. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of creative ways that you can kick off the school year well. You can bring a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. I think one of for us, I think to summarize what we've been talking about is like really be intentional. Really take advantage of the opportunities to build community amongst your students, amongst your staff. Lean in, like put on that. I know youth ministry is always a grind, right? But put on that hat of like, I got to take advantage of this time because this is going to set the stage for the rest of the year. And then one last little tidbit that I would encourage you to do is share the wins with your lead pastor going in. Like, I think sometimes at least for me, I always would forget or maybe think it's unimportant, but it's really, I think, encouraging for the lead pastor and then in turn the church to hear about what's happening. And typically there's some real low-hanging fruit, some low-hanging wins that we can share about, leading into that new year. And I think that helps set the stage for your relationship with them, for their buy-in and excitement about youth ministry. Maybe down the road when you're looking to raise funds for this trip or that trip, it's like, hey, we're all in and we've got good. We got 3 new students that came or, whatever, however many it is. So
yeah, that's great. That's great.
Any tips for you? Any kind of last minute, like always carry cash in your shoe in case you get robbed?
Well, that's totally unrelated to that.
No, I think that applies to youth ministry. Sometimes
good.
You get some wild kids.
You don't know who's going to show up at the beginning of the school year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Never sing too loud in worship.
Are you asking specifically about this topic or just any random
No, I mean,
advice that
I'm thinking
have?
Specifically to youth ministry, but yeah, if you have any advice for the people.
Hey, I would say, as much as you're taking care of your staff and your students, this is going to sound like an echo of things we say all the time, but you got to take care of yourself too. You got to take care of yourself at the beginning of the year. So it's a great season for you to establish some new healthy habits. Try something different devotionally. Try to change some, even if it's you've got a rhythm that you like, add something new, change
Yeah.
something new. It's a great season too for you to try some new things and some exciting things. Sometimes you can be so focused on your students and your staff, things like that you forget I need some healthy rhythms in my own life as well. So
True.
using this season as a relaunch for you too. Maybe it's shaking some funky feelings. Maybe you had a weird summer, or it was a kind of a lousy end of the school year, or maybe you lost some students that you're kind of grieving, or some staff. Sometimes staff disappears
Yeah.
during the summer too. So taking care of yourself in the beginning of this new season, establishing some new healthy routines for you, I think could be a big win too.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, thanks, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. We're excited to see what God does in your youth ministry this upcoming year. We're praying that it's fruitful and that you're blessed and students are impacted. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.